To start a new landfill, from starting it to be able to open up and take your first truckload of garbage, can take as many as 10 years. Wow. And you could spend probably $50 million, depending on the size of the landfill that you're going to do. But that's before you take anything. That's buying the land, that's applying the permit, that's buying the equipment you're going to need, hiring employees. That's before you even take that 1 ounce of trash. The other thing is, you're looking at what the state laws are. Some states are different than what the federal government has passed as the minimum standards, which are called Subtitle D regulations, of how a landfill has to be built. In other words, what the engineering design is, all the hydrogeology studies and all that. Those are the criteria it has to meet to be able to have a landfill, or once you get your permit, what you have to follow within your permit and guidelines. Now, of course, the federal government puts minimum standards. The state can put anything above that if they want to. Now, when you develop a landfill, when you start at the very beginning, we got all our permits, we're ready to go into the first cell, let's say. Basically, you have an excavation. In other words, that permit you put in has engineering designs of how the landfill is going to be developed. It's going to have all the vertical layouts of it. It's going to have all the horizontal. It's going to tell you by engineering designs, by elevations, and in the vertical limits as to where this landfill is going to go, right? And it's engineered so that when this landfill is closed, it will meet the closure aspect of what we need to do, all the surface water draining, because when this landfill closes, we'll be responsible for it for 30 years after we close the gates, okay? And that's monitoring the methane gas, leachate collection systems, the grass, subsidence, everything. So these engineering designs say, okay, this landfill is going to be this high, it's going to be this wide, and when it reaches those, that's when the landfill will close. Okay? So then you have to have a phasing element to it. Okay, I'm going to build this cell, this cell, this cell. 1, 2, 3, 4. Could be a 10-acre cell. Smaller landfills, it could be a 2-acre cells. We do as much as an 18-acre cell here. And it just depends on where it is in the landfill and the progression you're going to use. Okay? So once you decided you're going to do cell 1, let's say it's a 10-acre cell, and we're going to excavate 30 foot deep below the natural ground level. Okay, so we hire a construction company to come in and they excavate the cell, and they take and stockpile the dirt because we'll use that for cover. Once they get down to the bottom, to the elevations of the subgrade, then we have to put in our liner materials. And what a liner is, that's the protection between the trash and the groundwater, or the clay below it, so that you make sure that you don't have a leak or anything leaking out of the landfill, basically. It's kind of like when I do tours of little kids, it's like, think about your mom's trash can in the kitchen. When she puts that trash can in there, she puts a trash liner in there, right?
Right.
And what does she do that for? It's to keep everything else clean.
Right.
And that's basically the same principle. So depending where you are in your state, you're going to put in a clay liner. That clay liner could be 1 foot thick, it could be 2 foot. There's some places that are 3 foot. Okay? You're looking at the permeability of the soil and how fast would water run through that, and if it did, what would the clay liner do, or the clay material, as far as taking out any of the they're not hazardous, but any of the things that would cause a change in groundwater. Okay, so it's like a filtering system. But then, so here in Colorado, because it's very dry, it's a very arid climate, we have a foot of clay that we have to put in there. In a more humid climate with more rain, you'd probably have 2 foot. All right, so it meets a certain permeability requirement. That that's the ability for it to hold water.
Okay.
Then on top of that, we put a synthetic liner, which is a 60 mil HDPE, okay? It's a high density polyurethane liner is what they call it, 60 mils thick. That goes on top of the clay. Now realize this whole thing on the bottom has been graded so that when the water hits that clay, or when you put the plastic liner in, when it hits it, it drains to a specific location. And it's got a series of pipes in it that are perforated so that you can put a pump on it, because it'll drain the sump, and we pump the leachate out. Okay, the reason for that is if you keep the water off of there, then you really don't have a problem with anything leaking. By law, we can't have more than 1 foot of head pressure on top of the liner. So you couldn't have a foot of water anywhere on top of that liner at any given time, according to our permit. Okay, so we put the synthetic liner down. The synthetic liner comes in rolls, and I'll show you one of the rolls, and they weld these panels together, and they do it with an extrusion machine. And what it does is it makes 2 seams where they overlap, okay, and it's heat welded. And the reason for that is then it creates a pocket between those 2 seams, and you test the air in there by pressurizing it to make sure it doesn't leak. That way you know your seams are correct. Then they do, like every so many square feet, they'll cut out a piece of the liner and send it in for a destructive test. In other words, they try to destroy this at a certain PSI, and it has to meet that requirement, okay? So once that's all done, then you lay down that leachate collection system to where this sump is. And then there'll be a pipe that comes up, that's, you know, with a pump down in the bottom, so that you can pump that either into a tank or a truck and haul it off to a wastewater treatment plant, or in cases like we have here, we're able to recirculate that leachate because we don't create that much of it. What we can do with that is put it in our water truck, and we can spray for dust control anywhere on the lined portion of the landfill. We can actually recirculate it into the landfill so that it goes back down through the trash, because you don't have that much moisture here, and you need moisture for the trash to break down and create methane gas, okay? So once we get all that done, then there's the leachate collection system is that pipe that has perforations in it. It's wrapped with a gravel pack. And then we put a woven material that we sew together on top of the liner and on top of that leachate sump and lines. And what that does is acts as a filtration system so you don't plug up any of your infrastructure, okay? Then on that, you put a drainage layer, and that's when we'll put in our first layer of trash. Now, the first layer of trash that goes in there is going to be about an 8-foot lift tall, and it's going to be good trash material, stuff like you throw away at your house, residential trash. We don't want to put commercial stuff like construction and demolition on it, because we want what's called a fluff layer all the way across that to protect all that liner system. So we don't even compact it, we just fluff it in there, okay? And then with the next lift, which is about a 25-foot lift, then we're able to compact it and put the material in, because we don't want anything being shoved down into that liner. The idea is that once you do cover a lift, when you come back to put the next lift on, we want to dig the dirt out of that. Where we covered before, we call that recut. The reason you want to take that out is, if you think about it, okay, if you cover this lift and you bring another one, when water runs down, it's going to hit that dirt lift and it'll start leaking out the sides. So we don't want that to happen. Same with methane gas. If methane gas is being generated, we want it to come up in landfill to hit where our gas wells are so we can pull it out. It's like a big vacuum. If you don't have that, it will find its way out the side of the landfill, and then again, as it goes out, water will go out. So then you have to repair them, okay? So you're trying to minimize anything that happens. The nice thing about Colorado in this area is we don't have the moisture content like you do in other places. You don't have problems with that really on a general note. You don't really have those leachate problems and gas problems, because the way the gas is so dry, it works its way through there. You don't have any blockage. It's pretty decent. But you go to places like Houston or St. Louis, you know, you get 70 or 80 inches of rain a year, then you start generating up a lot of leachate that has to be either pumped out and treated at a wastewater treatment plant, or a recirculation system that handles that. The problem with recirculating at those kind of facilities is that you're not getting rid of anything, you keep generating because you get so much moisture. And at some point you'll have to take it. See that truck going up in the air?
Yeah.
That's what we call a tipper.
Okay.
And what it does is the truck backs on it and it hooks the fifth wheel on it, places the stands down, and that platform raises that thing up in the air and dumps it. And then he'll bring it back down, it hooks back up, and he pulls it off. They both hold about the same amount of material. But we usually work top and bottom, and then that way we have smaller trucks out of the way of the bigger trucks. If we have end dumps, they'll dump over in the side so that they've got more than 50 foot on each side to dump, so in case something would tip over, it doesn't, lay into another truck or a pickup truck or something like that. You can see how close these houses are. So think about when the trucks run up here like roll-offs and clang on their back of their box and on the rails, it makes quite a bit of noise, and it can be irritating to these people. So we want to try to be a good neighbor, and I told them at a meeting that we'd be doing this and try to get this done within a year, and then they won't see any of our operations going back. And that's the first lane, and then next to it there's two automatic scales. We call them wizards. So people that have accounts that come in all the time, like some of these transfer traders and Western, it's a big transfer operation. Our company with our smaller trucks, they have a card. Swipe that card, it's already got all their information in it, takes the weight, prints a receipt, they pull the receipt right off of the wizard and they go done. We'll get a bird migration here, probably start coming in September, October, seagulls and then starlings, and we use a squawker as well as falcons out here. We got a bird guy that we'll hire to come out to chase those birds off. Okay. And the birds will start to get a habit knowing that when this guy comes in with this colored truck, he's got those birds on. So we have them use like the white trucks like we have.
Yeah.
And then that way, when we're driving up there and the birds, falconer's not here, they start getting the point, well, this truck's coming up, we need to get out of here. And then eventually they don't just land here. You're still going to have a little bit of birds just because of the migration pattern. Starlings migrate as a group. Seagulls do too, to a certain extent. But you've seen starlings when they make those big loops in the sky and all that. They're huge groups of birds when they migrate. The most important thing we do out here is get in and out of here safely, and everybody goes home safely. Okay, we don't want anybody hurt in any capacity.